So, folks, um, we need to talk about a recent piece that went up on the Times of Israel's website. Many of you may have heard of it. Many of you may have seen screenshots of the title, but I was really curious about what it actually wound up saying. And in the course of me kind of investigating said article, well, I found that this is not an isolated case, okay? And what I'm talking about kind of circumspectly is a blog was published on the Times of Israel website titled Lebensraum Needed for Israel's Exploding Population. Yes, for those of you who don't know, Lebensraum is German for living space. And it was used to justify Nazi expansion during World War II. And yeah, we're gonna read this. We're gonna go over this because it was pulled off of the Times of Israel. And yeah, now you might say, "Oh, well, it's a blog. You know, it's not overseen." People who publish on the Times of Israel are vetted. Like, you can't just like go and write a blog on the Times of Israel. As far as I'm aware. Maybe it does work like that. I'm happy to admit if I'm wrong. I don't think I am. And here we go. Israel's population is projected to grow to 11.1 million by 2030, 13.2 million in 2040, and 15.2 million by 2048. That's why hanging on to the West Bank is such a contentious issue. Lebensraum. These people need places to live in a nation short of landmass. Compare Israel to its neighbor Jordan, which has a smaller population yet about 5 times the land area. If Israel is to maintain its agricultural industry, its exploding population will need to grow up in high-rise apartment complexes as well as out, possibly into Judea and Samaria, which is the West Bank. That's what Israeli nationalists call the West Bank, which is not Israel's, importantly. And now, the world, now bulging with 8 billion people, is on the verge of a demographic time bomb being spawned by climate change, drought, wars, and poverty. The UN estimates there may be as many as 220 million migrants from the effects of climate change by 2050. That's why climate change-induced immigration featured at recent COP29 meet. Countless numbers of desperate people from hard-hit third world nations are migrating to the European Union and North America. Where they are not going is Russia. The world's largest single national landmass remains largely devoid of people. There's irony in Putin's Ukraine war. If the dictator wasn't so intent on pointlessly expanding Russia's 11 time zone border, his nation might have had a rosy future as the world's new breadbasket, enabling it to exert commercial and political pressure on much of his adversaries who are, or will be, grappling with critical natural resource shortages. And I have to stress here, we're already like so far off the deep end here. Like, this is some cuckoo bananas nonsense, okay? Like, climate change is going to make a lot of refugees, but there's not really a world in which, like, Russia became that. If they could become that, that's what they'd be doing. Let's continue. As it stands now, Russia will remain a pariah rogue state for some time to come, feared but unloved in a state limbo. But the case of Russia offers a prime example of the state of world migration, with most migrants heading to a few wealthy and densely populated nations The world may now be bursting with 8 billion people, but what Russia lacks is people. Its 145 million population is declining. The national birth rate is stagnant. The war has also created an exodus of Russians, either against the war or fearful of it. To top this off, the pandemic has killed as many as 500,000 there. The actual count is hard to calculate. According to the most pessimistic scenarios, Russia estimates its population might drop by 12 million in the next 15 years. Oh no, if that happened, they don't only have 133 million. Oh no. How will they survive? And even the most optimistic forecasts say the death rates will still exceed birth rates in 2035. Oh, also, can we just point out here, like, one of the biggest red flags imaginable are people who talk about birth rates. Like, yeah, you know why the birth rate is declining? People have to work too hard and don't have enough time to, like, have children. They don't have the time, they don't have the money. Okay? If you're working 2 jobs and living with like 4 other people in order to make rent, like, you don't also want to have a child on top of that. That's not going to work out well for you in any respect. Oh yeah, no, this is absolutely a white nationalist screed here. So, Russia may depend on migrants to cover population losses no matter which scenario comes into play. The US says more than 1 million Ukrainians have been forcibly taken to Russia. The fact is, Putin needs people to populate the world's largest nation, and kidnapping more than 1 million Ukrainians is a start. But Russia's low population density, only 9 people per square kilometer, 199th place of 213 nations, is a blessing and a curse. The curse is not having enough workers to man any future growing consumer activity, something that hasn't been a priority for Putin's 22-year reign. By comparison, St. Kitts and Nevis, the smallest nation in the Americas, is ranked 64th in the world with 206 people per square kilometer. The US, ranked 161, has only 36 people, and the UK, ranked 43, has 278 people per square kilometer. On the other hand, Russia's blessing is not having the situation the West has, with countless third world immigrants flooding in and helping to use up finite natural resources. Can I just pause here? This is not a phenomenon that occurs. Like, there's not a finite number of resources in America that's preventing us from taking care of every single immigrant that comes across the border. There's no system or program in place that, like, oh no, we're running out. We ran out of toilet paper because of all the immigrants that came in. We only had a finite amount of toilet paper. No, like, none of that is happening. We have more than enough food. We have more than enough shelter. We have more than enough, like, energy. We have more than enough water. We have more than enough everything. There aren't shortages happening because of migrants. This is psychotic. Like it or not, there are limits on how many immigrants can be accepted by wealthy Western nations at any one time before living standards in these countries are adversely impacted both economically and environmentally. For example, in just 9 months of 2022, 42,000 undocumented immigrants crossed the English Channel for a safe harbor in the UK. And daily, even during bad weather, scores of migrants and asylum seekers attempt the dangerous channel crossing in small boats supplied by criminal gangs. You know, like, the UK can handle 42,000 new people entering the country. That's not a lot of people for, like, a country. A couple dozen tried to cross the channel in boats? Oh no. Truly, they'll be the straw that broke the camel's back. And at the same time here, I kind of see where this is going, and I don't like it. You know, we already knew where it was going from the title. Let's be real. Look at the USA. Following World War II, its population stood at 150 million. Living for most Americans was a comfortable middle-class experience. Public utilities, gas, and even food were dirt cheap. Yet today, the population is 338 million and climbing, now with a declining middle class, and the biggest gap between wealthy and poor citizens in the developed world. That's not because of migrants, that's because of CEOs. The CEOs are consolidating the wealth and creating monopolies. That's capitalism, baby. When you... I don't know how to explain this any better. It's basically a pyramid scheme. You happen to own something, and then you pay workers less than what it costs you to, like, procure materials, and then you sell goods that they make at a profit. So you'll make more money, and they make less money. And over time, that concentrates wealth. The people concentrating the wealth aren't undocumented immigrants. They're at they're literally at the bottom of the entire pyramid. It's no longer just a matter of jobs for people. There's plenty of work available in the US and UK for new arrivals. If this past summer is a hint at the new normal, water shortages amid extreme heat waves along with power cuts will mean a comfortable life only for those who can afford it. And one world leader predicts a doomsday scenario if the first world doesn't look after the third world. Rich countries must sign a historic pact with the poor on the climate, or we are doomed, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has warned during the COP27 climate meet, as a deepening gulf between the developed and developing world has put climate talks on the brink. COP29 took place amid the world's worst geopolitical tensions for years, over the Ukraine and Gaza wars, a spiraling global cost of living crisis, and the deepening economic gloom. But the gulf must be bridged if humanity is to have a hope of avoiding the worst ravages of climate breakdowns. There is no way we can avoid a catastrophic situation if the two, the developed and developing world, are not able to establish a historic pact. Because at the present level, we will be doomed. With environmental and climate issues now center stage, the world population is also a key issue, yet COP27 didn't address world population growth and immigration. I'm sorry, how exactly were they supposed to address population growth? Also, all of this is being born out of that proto-eugenicist economic theory. What's his name? Is it? It's not Malthus, is it? No, Malthusian. Yeah, this is all born out of like the Malthusian view of economics. Like, oh, we'll just have to, the world population will get too high, that everyone will have to die, and then we'll be good again. Just yeah, you gotta clean the trash every so often, and then everything's good. Except that's not how population works. So, yeah. I can't believe immigrants would ruin the environment just to get into the US. Yeah, it really is kind of that type of hand-wringing. Russia's small population gives it an environmental edge. By land area and population... okay, honestly, I hadn't read this prior to this. There's an awful lot of, like, Russia, US, etc., migrants... this article is supposed to be about Israel. Let's skip ahead. We're not going through all this. All right. Just an entire list of countries by population density. This is psycho shit. I'm sorry. Where else is Israel mentioned in this article? It's literally not mentioned after the first two paragraphs. What the fuck? Is this like an AI thing? Did this guy just like AI dump, or was I like the initial justification is just, well, I think we'll need to like occupy the West Bank and colonize it because we'll need living space. And then the entire rest of this article is basically just laying out, well, the rest of the world is going to be struggling with living space, and so Israel's also going to be struggling with living space, and really by holding onto the West Bank, we're not doing anything different than the rest of the world. That really seems to be the argument, if this wasn't in fact made by AI, which I'm no longer convinced that this is like a real thing made by a real person. This is honestly, this could be psychopath stuff. That being said, in the process of trying to track down the text for this article, I did wind up stumbling across this article in Haaretz from 13 years ago. And I'm not going to subscribe to Haaretz to read the entire thing, but Lebensraum as a justification for Israeli settlements. We were fortunate when we occupied the West Bank because we had not done so. Had we not done so, where would we have come to live? And who knows how high housing prices would have risen? Until now, Israel had supported the occupation of the territories with two pillars: history and security, its right to inherit the land and its obligation to defend it. In recent weeks, a third pillar was added, which all these years was hidden under straw and stubble. And maybe it's not a pillar, but a snake, whose head must be crushed while it's still small. And yeah, so I am kind of inclined to think that this first article is in fact real, because it's basically just an unironic argument in favor of doing exactly what this article from 13 years ago is saying Israeli politicians and political figures are advocating for, which is we need to occupy the occupied territories more so we can colonize them for living space. Yeah. It made me really mad, but now it made me mad initially, but now I'm just kind of confused. I'm trying to figure out if that was AI or not. Was I duped? Yeah, I don't know. Like, how you're arguing in favor of occupying millions of people, subjugating them to a second class, not even citizen level status, and your justification is, well, we'll make the homes cheaper. That's insane, dog. That's insane. Anyway, yeah, maybe it's a bad sign that we have a 13-year history in Israel of, the far right and a growing number of people talking about the need to create more living space in similar terms to what was used in Nazi Germany. Maybe that's a bad sign. I'm not an expert in such matters, but maybe, maybe that's bad. So, with that being said, I got nothing. I got nothing. I thought I've reached into my mind bag for a way to end this and close it out, and I have nothing. This is awful. It's all bad.